Welcome back to the Shave Horse build. Today we're going to lay out and cut the rear legs for the base. And when they're done, they'll be ready to let into the rail and we'll be able to stand this thing up on its feet. Now that the rail assembly is glued up and setting off to the side, we can get down to cutting out and making the rear legs. The first step in that process was to clean up one of the faces so we could have a true face, and then true up one edge so we could have a true edge. I also ran the planer over the hand plane over the opposite face to make sure that it was clean and ready to go. After that, I cut the the stock for the part to the length that's in the plans. And it's really important to have a square end on each end of this part because we'll be using both of them as a reference edge for the angles that the part needs. So now we need to do the layout. The first step in the layout after you've got your part to size is to draw the line for the angle at the bottom of the foot. And that is a 20-degree angle. So I've got my compass here, or my protractor, excuse me, and we'll just put that right on the point on this side and mark the line. Okay, then we need to measure from here up to the break point where the top of the leg goes off at an angle. Okay. Then you take your protractor at the same angle, use the top edge as a reference, and mark the line. Then this corner becomes our reference here, so same angle again. That's the top of the leg. Okay, so we need to mark the thickness of this spot here. We have a reference line to make sure our ruler is straight on this side. Over here, I'm basically going to make sure that the ruler is on an even inch line on both sides, and that's how I know it'll be pretty close to square. The other option would be to put this protractor up here, set the ruler on 0, and then mark the length. That way I know that I'm square to that line, I'm on the same angle. So we'll go ahead and draw this outer edge at the top of the leg. Now we need to know where the tangent is for the curve that swings through here. So let's lay that out. Okay, let me go ahead and mark that line. And just to double check, it should be the same measurement. It is, good. Okay, so I'm going to swing this arc with my compass, but I don't have any material. So the easy way to solve that problem is to just clamp another board right there. Extend this line. Yep. Put the pencil on the tangent and swing an arc. Doesn't take much. You could use this 3-inch radius that we've marked in the plans, or really you could just find something that's close and go off the tangent. These dimensions, you know, this needs to be a consistent width because we're going to be drilling counterbores, and you want them to look kind of consistent. But as far as this curve here and the line that you end up taking out to the point, it's not really a critical measurement. So, you know, if you have the lid to a paint can or you know, a large can of tomatoes or beans, put it on there, make it work. So the next step is to connect the tangent of this curve on this side to the far point there that we started on. And you've got a leg. So I will cut all this at the bandsaw. This cut here doesn't have to be super precise. Once we get the base assembled, we'll actually be marking all the bottoms of the feet level and cutting them off to flush with the floor. On this end, this cut, I'll probably cut it and leave a little extra. The line is helpful when it comes time to get the leg positioned properly, but again, we will actually be cutting the top of the leg flush with the top of the rail, so there's no need to be really precise here. This again is just an exterior curve. It just, you want it to kind of look nice if you can. This line here is probably the only real critical line. This line, this is where it actually mates with the rail, the dado we're going to cut in the rail. And it needs to be square and it needs to be flat and straight. So I'll be really careful when I'm cutting this at the bandsaw, and then everything else I'll just kind of cut off quickly. And then as soon as that's done, I will come back and I'll clean everything up, and then we'll be ready to go back to working on the rail assembly. All right, so the first thing we want to do is get these faces cleaned up. We've got this face cleaned up. This face is already nice and true from joining the edge using it as a reference surface. The two ends are as good as they need to be for this job. Now we've got to clean up this face, and we have a situation where the grain is running downhill into this little valley. Can't really get to this with anything but a rasp, but this we can start out with the block plane, get most of it cleaned up, and then finish off the top with the rasp. Okay, that's about all we're going to get there. So we'll switch the rasp for this part. I like to go diagonal at first, and then when I think I've got all the bandsaw marks out, I'll go along the grain, and that will help me know if the saw marks are gone. Also will help to kind of dig out most of the diagonal scrapes, and then I will switch to the scraper after that. So when I'm getting started on an edge like this, rather than try to get the scraper perpendicular to the edge, I usually like to skew it so that way I can kind of start without having to dig in so hard on that edge. And it won't have to worry about the scraper edge getting caught out here on the corner. And I'm not pushing at an angle, I'm skewing it and pushing along the part. Okay, that one's done. I'll hit that with a little bit of sandpaper before I send it out the door because the texture here on the hand plane section is a little bit smoother and nicer than the one here on the curb. So I'll just hit that whole edge with some 220 or 330, 350, whatever the 300 grit is, to kind of blend it all together and make it look good. Another thing you can do if you don't have a rasp is you can actually use a scraper to get bandsaw marks out, as long as you are careful about how you hold the scraper and how you push it across the work. I started to rasp this out, but I stopped myself because I wanted to show you this little technique. So I'm going to clamp it in the vise here, and if you hold a card scraper parallel to the bandsaw cuts, it's just going to ride the cuts. But if you skew it and push along the axis of the part, it'll skip over the top, kind of like a joiner, and it'll clean. And just kind of alternate my directions here. It'll clean that face up really well. So if you don't have a ton of work to do and you don't have a rasp handy, this a scraper will work pretty well. It may have actually taken less time to do it that way. The one drawback is if your cut line isn't perfectly straight, if it's a little wavy, the wide flat on a rasp like this will actually smooth out the bigger defects, but the scraper can actually ride right over the tops of those bandsaw marks as long as you skew it, and it'll take them out and leave you with a pretty nice smooth finish. And if you never used a card scraper before, they're a great tool. They're really inexpensive. I've got a video that I'll link to here in this series that shows you how to grind it to this shape, and which is the shape that Crucible Tool uses, and they've given this pattern out to anyone who wants to make their own. And then there's another video on how to polish the edge and sharpen it. Okay, so we've got our rear legs cut out to shape. They are ready to be let into the rails, and we'll cover how I like to do that on the next video.